What would you do if you knew that the future of the earth is in danger? And what if, in a moment of death, you had a vision of what is to come? Would you believe it? Imagine standing before a truth so deep and dark, capable of changing everything you think about life, the world, and even your purpose. Today, I will tell you the story of John, an engineer at NASA, who experienced something that challenged his faith, his understanding, and the reality in which he lives. John was not a religious person. For him, science was the only answer. But after a fatal accident, he had the opportunity to see the truth about what awaits the planet in the year 2030. What did he see? A future that few would dare to imagine. Stay until the end and discover what John learned and how you too can prepare for what is to come. My name is John Matthews. I am an engineer at NASA, and until recently, my life revolved completely around work. I was 42 years old, and like many, I believed that science explained everything. If something could not be scientifically proven, it did not exist. I had no room in my life for spiritual thoughts, and the idea of God was something distant to me. My daily routine was clear: long hours of work, space missions, and a small amount of time for my family. My world was perfectly structured, but all that changed in an instant. One morning, like any other, I was on my way to a meeting when a traffic accident occurred. It was so fast, so unexpected. I remember the sensation of losing control, the strong impact, and then darkness. I did not know what had happened, but I knew almost immediately. I had died. It was in that moment that my life, as I knew it, disintegrated. I did not know that this was only the beginning of an experience that would change my view of the world and of myself forever. The next thing I remember is a strange sensation. It was not like any dream or anything I could explain. It was as if my body was no longer there, as if I was floating above everything I knew. I felt an intense cold, and then a deep peace. I could not see anything, but the sensation was clear. Something had changed. My body, my thoughts, everything I knew no longer existed. I was suspended in an empty space without time or place, without pain. At first I thought it was some kind of hallucination, or perhaps a very vivid dream, but when I tried to move, I could not. I could not feel my legs or my arms. I was floating, and the sensation was overwhelming. Fear began to take hold of me. What had happened? Where was I? I could not understand it. It was as if I had left my body, but my mind was still intact. In that moment, a deep, soft, yet powerful voice resonated through my being. It was not a human voice, not from someone I could see, but I heard it in a way that made me stop completely. The voice said, "Do not fear, my son. You are here for a reason." I looked around, searching for the source of the voice. That was when everything around me began to shine, a warm light, full of peace that surrounded me completely. I could not understand what was happening, but somehow I knew that something incredibly important was about to occur. I was not alone. In that space of light, I began to see a figure approaching. The presence was majestic, but at the same time full of love and compassion. I could not see exact details, but a deep peace came over me. All the fear I had felt before disappeared. I knew I was not in danger. I knew that figure was someone important. The light around me intensified, and my heart began to beat faster than I had ever felt. I felt a presence that not only surrounded me, but penetrated deeply into my being. It was as if my entire existence was being seen and understood, not with judgment, but with a love so immense that it overwhelmed me. There were no words that could describe that feeling. It was a mix of comfort and calm, but also of a deep truth that I knew I had to face. Suddenly, that figure began to come even closer. Its presence became clearer, and I could feel a powerful yet gentle energy. It was as if all the darkness and pain I had felt in my life vanished in an instant. The figure approaching was like a man, but not exactly like any human being I had known. It was Jesus Christ. He did not look like the images I had seen in church or in books. There was no crown of thorns, no white robe. What I felt when I looked at him was deeper than any physical representation. His gaze was intense but not of judgment. It was of infinite compassion. When he spoke, his voice was not a human voice, but a voice that resonated in my soul. Every word he spoke seemed to touch a corner of my being that I did not know existed. "Have you lived your life seeking answers in the wrong place?" he said. "Science can explain much, but what truly matters cannot be explained with logic alone. Love, faith, the connection to the divine, that is what gives purpose. And now I will show you what the world is missing." In that moment, I felt as if my soul opened before him. I could not help but feel a mix of regret, awe, and a deep peace at the same time. I knew that what I was about to see would change my life forever. Jesus extended his hand, and an impressive landscape began to appear before my eyes. It was not an ordinary vision, but a vivid and so real vision that I could almost feel it. Before me unfolded an image of the earth, but not the one I knew. Cities, once full of life and hope, were now in ruins. Streets that used to be full of people were deserted, and a sense of despair floated in the air. "This is what will come if humanity does not change its course," said Jesus with a voice soft, yet full of authority. "The earth will witness natural disasters, chaos, and suffering that could have been avoided." I saw an alarming rise in waters covering vast stretches of land. Coastal cities that were once prosperous were submerged in the ocean. Storms became stronger, more destructive, and droughts ravaged the resources of the most vulnerable countries. People, trapped by fear and panic, wandered aimlessly, seeking answers that never came. In every corner, I saw the mark of human suffering, of hunger, of despair. But it was not all darkness. I also saw those who, despite the devastation, remained firm in their faith. People gathered, praying, seeking comfort and strength in spirituality. Their faith was their refuge, their hope in the midst of the storm. Despite everything that was to come, there was a light that continued to shine in those who chose faith over fear. "This is what is to come," said Jesus. "But it is not the end. It is only the beginning of an awakening. Humanity has one last chance to change, to repent, to return to the divine, but they must act now before it is too late." That vision of the devastated earth was etched in my mind. The future seemed bleak, but there was hope, a light in the midst of the darkness, and I knew that somehow I had to be part of that light. While the vision of the destroyed earth still lingered in my mind, Jesus led me to a new perspective. The light that had once surrounded me began to take on a different form, clearer and more penetrating. That was when I understood that the catastrophes were not only natural or physical. The true causes of suffering were spiritual. What you are seeing is not just a material disaster, said Jesus. It is the result of centuries of wrong decisions by a humanity that has strayed from the divine. The earth reflects the state of their hearts. When man abandons faith, when he chooses selfishness, materialism, and indifference, everything else follows that same path of decay. At first, I found it hard to understand his words. How could people be responsible for natural disasters? But as the vision intensified, I began to understand that the root of the chaos was not only in political decisions or climate change. It was a deep disconnection between humanity and its divine purpose. Wars, social divisions, hatred, and lack of compassion. Everything was piling up like a snowball, dragging the world towards its own destruction. Jesus showed me how, in the heart of every human being, there was a void that could only be filled by faith and divine love. And yet, humanity had chosen to ignore that truth. Man had chosen to trust in his own wisdom, forgetting that only through faith could the true purpose be found, he explained. I could see how past generations had sown the ground for the coming disaster, the indifference to the suffering of others, the disdain for spirituality, and the denial of a higher power. All of it had led to a disconnection that affected not only people, but the entire planet. The laws of nature were not only physical, they were also spiritual, and the rejection of these laws had triggered a cycle of destruction that seemed unstoppable. The greatest disaster humanity will face is not the destruction of its cities, said Jesus firmly. It is the spiritual death of its soul. That is what must be avoided. In that moment, I understood that not only the future of the earth was at stake, but also the spiritual future of every individual. If humanity did not change, it would not only suffer physically, but would lose something far more valuable, its connection with the divine. Jesus looked at me intently, as if he wanted me to absorb every word he was about to say. Your mission, John, does not end here. What you have seen is only the beginning. I have brought you here so you can understand what is at stake, but also so you can share what you have learned with the world. Humanity needs to wake up, and now you have the responsibility to carry this message. His words were like a blow of reality, but also an urgent call. I felt overwhelmed, not knowing where to begin. How could I share something so great, so profound, with people who were still living their daily routines, trapped in their earthly concerns? How could I make them understand what the future held for us? But they are not alone, he continued. There is hope, and that hope lies in the heart of each person who chooses to return to the divine. Change is not achieved only through words, but through actions. Every small act of faith, of love, can reverse the course of events. Jesus then showed me images of people who were beginning to awaken. Not all, of course, but some. I saw how faith was being planted in their hearts, how those who had turned away from God began to return to Him. I saw families praying together, communities united in prayer and action, helping each other, and small acts of compassion multiplying throughout the world. Remember, said Jesus, love is the answer. Faith is the key. No matter how dark the situation may seem, there is always light in those who choose to follow the divine path. The future is not written. Every human being has the power to change it. It was then that I understood the magnitude of my mission. It was not only about warning people about the future, but inviting them to take a step towards faith, towards inner transformation. I could not remain silent. I had to share my experience, to open the eyes of those willing to see beyond the visible. The vision of the earth crumbling no longer seemed like a condemnation to me. I now saw in it an opportunity for awakening, for redemption, and I understood that my life had been guided to this point to be a witness of that truth. I could not ignore it. I could not return to my normal life without doing something about it. When I returned to my body, something had changed inside me. I was no longer the same man who had died that morning. I felt a mental and spiritual clarity I had never experienced before. Even though I had returned to earthly life, the mission Jesus had given me remained alive within me. I could not ignore it. I could not live the same way. The truth I had seen and experienced had to be shared. My return to life was not easy. The world was still the same. The routine was the same. But something inside me pushed me to speak, to warn others about what was coming. I knew I could not change everyone, but at least I could plant the seed of faith, hope, and preparation in those who were willing to listen. The visions of the earth's future remained present in my mind. The waters covering the cities, the people running in search of answers, the fear and despair. It was not a future I wanted for my children or for anyone, and the only way to avoid it was through a spiritual awakening. Humanity can avoid this destiny, but they must act now, Jesus had said. Time is not completely lost. There is an opportunity for change, but it depends on each one of you. It depends on faith, hope, and action. Now, every day I spend in this world is a constant reminder of my mission. Every person I meet, every opportunity to speak about what I saw, is a chance to make a difference. And it is not only about warning of disasters, but about inviting people to live with purpose, to return to the divine, to prepare their hearts for the times to come. I ask you now, knowing this story, what would you do if you knew the future was in your hands? What would you change in your life today to be prepared for what is coming? There is no time to lose. The earth and your soul depend on the decisions you make now. Do not wait until it is too late. Return to the divine. Reconnect with your purpose and act with love and faith. Transformation begins with each one of us. And if you decide to be part of this transformation, you will be part of the light that can change the course of the future.